What's up, guys? Thank you for joining me. I've been wanting to make a video about Joe's appearance on The View, but since that appearance, he's come out with his cancer diagnosis, so I made a video about that. And then I had to cover Megyn Kelly's beatdown of Jake Tapper. It was a beautiful thing. If you missed either of those videos, I'll put a link up. Please consider clicking on it if you have time. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because Joe is continuing to lie, and I absolutely want to call him out on it. Let's get right into the highlights.
Mr. President, last time you were here was a little over a month before the election, and you had made the selfless and very difficult decision, I'm sure, to step aside. And Democrats were feeling optimistic about the vice president's chances of winning the presidency. But then election night came, and it was like 2016 all over again. Yeah. So why do you think the vice president lost, and were you surprised?
No. I wasn't surprised, not because I didn't think the vice president was the most qualified person to be president. She is. She's qualified to be president of the United States of America. Right. But I was surprised. I wasn't surprised because they went the route of the sexist route, the whole route. I mean, this is a woman. She's this. She's that. I mean, it really. I've never seen quite as successful and a consistent campaign undercutting the notion that a woman couldn't lead the country and a woman of mixed race.
Yeah. First of all, he wasn't selfless. Joe wanted to stay in the race, but he was forced out by Pelosi and Obama. Secondly, he's doing what all Democrats do when they lose. They blame it on racism and misogyny. Joe is claiming that the Trump campaign attacked Kamala Harris because she was a woman of mixed race. To the liberals out there, can you do me a favor? Can you send me those ads that the Trump campaign ran attacking Kamala Harris on those two issues? Of course you can't, because they don't exist. But the idiots on The View nod in agreement with Joe. But there's something else he said that I originally missed, and I want to point it out to you. Let's go back to that statement again.
Undercutting the notion that a woman couldn't lead the country and a woman of mixed race.
Yeah. Did Joe just admit that Kamala is mixed race? When Trump pointed this out, he was attacked. Here's a quick short I made on this. I hope it makes you laugh.
Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
And certainly you could become the first Indian senator in U.S. history, which would be quite an accomplishment.
Not good.
Vice President Kamala Harris is black. She's always identified as black.
So what we're going to cook today is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because you are idiot.
Yes.
You are idiot.
Yes.
You are idiot.
Yes.
Joe and I talk about this all the time. Madam Vice President, and you know this, Charlene, she black.
Joe just admitted she ain't black. Let's go back to The View.
Knowing what you know now, do you think you would have beat him?
Yeah, he still got 7 million fewer votes.
Yes.
Okay. A lot of people didn't show up.
Joe says he got 7 million more votes than Trump got. Joe still expects you to believe that he got 81 million votes, 12 million more votes than Obama got, even though nobody showed up to his rallies. They were nearly empty every single time he spoke. But Joe expects us to believe that he got more votes than any president in history. Now listen to him claim that Trump's win wasn't all that decisive.
They're very close in those toss-up states. It was it wasn't a slam dunk.
It was a slam dunk, Joe. Trump has a mandate, and everybody knows it. This came up when Stephen A. Smith was on The View. Watch him school Joe Behar.
He's been going around with his cronies touting his so-called landslide and blowout win. But he won the popular vote by 1.5%, one of the smallest ever, and he won the general election by less than 50%. So what kind of mandate is this really?
Well, it is a mandate, and I'm going to explain why. And I don't mind the question, but let me be very clear. I'm no supporter of Trump. I'm a supporter of truth and the facts. And here's the facts. The man won every swing state. He increased in terms of his voter turnout in his favor from the standpoint of blacks, Latinos, and young voters. He increased his numbers in that regard from 2020. 89% of the counties shifted to the right. That's a mandate.
He's right. Trump has a mandate. And while Joe likes to claim that Trump barely beat Kamala, Joe needs to be reminded that even if you consider the 2020 election to be fair, it was Joe who barely beat Trump. Joe won Wisconsin by just 20,000 votes, and Arizona was won by just 11,000 votes, and so was Georgia. Think about that. In a state like Georgia, where nearly 5 million people voted, Trump supposedly lost by just 11,000 votes. Those 3 states total 37 electoral votes. If they go in the Trump column, Joe doesn't win. Now, before I show you the next clip, I just have to point out how dumb Kamala Harris is. She was on The View about a month before the election when Sonny asked her this question.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
The worst inflation in 41 years, an invasion at the border, a disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal that took the lives of 13 service members and left thousands of Americans behind, weaponizing the DOJ to go after political opponents, transitioning our children, and free taxpayer-funded transitioning surgeries for prisoners, just to name a few. And this idiot says there was nothing that she would do differently. That's why she lost the election. But now listen to the spin that Sonny puts on this when she brings it up to Joe.
Well, let me just follow up with this, because when the vice president was here, I asked her if she would have done something differently than your administration over the past 4 years. And because of all the successes that your administration had.
Because of all of the successes your administration had. You know, I don't like to insult people, but if you're watching The View, you should be outraged. They think you're an idiot. They think you're stupid enough to believe that spin.
I think her response was, there is not a thing that comes to mind. Now, that answer was weaponized against her. And there has been some reporting that you encouraged her for there to be no daylight between the two of you. First, is that true? And do you think in retrospect that she should have tried to differentiate all the wins that your administration had?
What wins, Sonny? What wins are you talking about that we had under Joe and Kamala? The war in Ukraine? Was that a win? $5 gas? In some places in California, it went up to $7, but nationally, it was about $5. It was $2.30 when Trump left office. Was that a win? Men beating up women in sports? Is that a win? What about the increase in housing? A 24% increase for renters and a tripling of mortgage rates for those looking to buy. What about the lies? All the lies we were told. Were those wins, Sonny, when they lied about the border and told us for 4 years that the border was secure?
Do you continue to maintain that the border is secure?
Yes, and we are working day in and day out to enhance its security. It is my testimony that the border is secure, and we are working every day, day and night, to increase its security.
The border is secure. The border, we are working to make the border more secure.
We have cameras today in Texas that are showing humongous groups of dozens or hundreds of migrants walking right into the country. So I'm curious what you meant last week when you said the border is closed.
What I meant is precisely that. The border is closed.
Well, there certainly is not an open border. We are continuing to employ our immigration proceedings and process and restrictions at the border.
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
What about inflation? Telling us that inflation was transitory and prices would eventually come down.
As our economy has come roaring back, we've seen some price increases. Some folks have raised worries that this could be a sign of persistent inflation. But that's not our view. Our experts believe, and the data shows, that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and expected to be temporary.
That these inflation rises will be transitory, that they will come back down next year.
Will settle down. Transitory.
That inflation will come down next year.
It will ease longer-term inflationary pressures.
This bill is going to ease inflationary pressures.
What about insisting that the vax would stop the spread of COVID and then firing those who refuse to take it? What about Joe telling us we wouldn't get COVID if we took the shot?
You're okay. You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
Were those wins, Sonny? And of course, we cannot talk about the lies from the Biden administration without talking about the cover-up about Joe's mental decline, how we were told for years from the corrupt media and the corrupt Democrats that Joe was sharp as a tack. Was that a win when Kamala insisted that Joe was fine? Here she is on CNN.
Vice President Harris, you were a very staunch defender of President Biden's capacity to serve another 4 years. Right after the debate, you insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
No, not at all. Not at all. I have served with President Biden for almost 4 years now, and I'll tell you, it's one of the greatest honors of my career, truly.
She has no regrets about lying to the American people. Dana said that she was a staunch supporter of Joe's mental capacity to serve. Here she is right after the Her report came out, the report that determined that Joe was too mentally deficient to stand trial. Here's Kamala's reaction.
I have been privileged and proud to serve as Vice President of the United States with Joe Biden as President of the United States. And what I saw of that report last night, I believe is, as a former prosecutor, the comments that were made by that prosecutor, gratuitous, inaccurate, and inappropriate. So the way that the president's demeanor in that report was characterized could not be more wrong on the facts and clearly politically motivated.
And here she is in another interview defending Biden's age.
One issue for voters in the upcoming election is President Biden's age. An AP poll recently showed that 77% of Americans and 69% of Democrats believe he's too old for a second term. Do you think he's ready to serve as president until he's 86? As somebody who works with him, have you seen changes in recent years?
First of all, let me say that our president has been an extraordinary leader who has accomplished things that previous presidents hoped and dreamed and promised they would do and did not achieve. So yes, I see him every day. A substantial amount of time we spend together is in the Oval Office, where I see how his ability to understand issues and weave through complex issues in a way that no one else can to make smart and important decisions on behalf of the American people have played out. And so I will say to you that I think the American people ultimately want to know that their president delivers and Joe Biden delivers.
Joe weaves through complex issues and he delivers. That was her message. Now let's go back to The View and listen to Joe blame Trump for not allowing him to secure the border.
Well, Mr. President, when you announced that you wouldn't be seeking re-election, only 28% of the country thought that the country was on the right track. Now, you are understandably very proud of many achievements in your administration, but do you take any responsibility for not hearing the concerns of voters on the border security or cost of living sooner? And do you take any responsibility for Trump's re-election?
Yes, I do, because, look, I was in charge and he won. So, I take responsibility, number one. But number two, you remember we put together a commission leading with one of the most conservative members of the United States Senate from Oklahoma running it. We came up with a significant means by which we could deal with the border. What did Trump do? He got on the telephone and he called Republicans, do not support it. It's legal, it'll work, it'll make Biden look good, don't do it. And they backed off.
Can't someone be impeached for something like that?
Of course, the idiot Joy wants to know if Trump can be impeached for this. Meanwhile, he wasn't even in office when this supposedly happened. But Joe is doing the same thing Kamala did, which is blame Trump for killing the bill. Here's Kamala.
A bill was crafted, which we supported, which I support. And Donald Trump got word of this bill that would have contributed to securing our border. And because he believes that it would not have helped him politically, he told his folks in Congress, don't put it forward. He killed the bill.
They ignore the border for 3 years and tell us that it's secure. And then 6 months before the election, they produce a border bill that was really nothing more than an amnesty bill and a pathway to citizenship. In fact, the name of the bill was called the U.S. Citizenship Act. And the very first line reads, "This bill establishes a path to citizenship." That was H.R. 1177, the border bill pushed by the Democrats that would supposedly secure the border, even though the main purpose of the bill, as stated on line 1, is to grant amnesty to these illegals, to establish a pathway to citizenship. The Republicans passed a bill called H.R. 2. Do you know what the name of that bill is called? The Secure the Border Act of 2023. That bill actually secured the border, and not a single Democrat voted for it. I made a video on that so-called border bill that Joe and Kamala love to talk about. Here's a small clip from it. And speaking of FEMA, this bill gives them $1.4 billion with one string attached. The money cannot be used for Americans. It is specifically allocated for the Shelter and Services Program only. Why is this important? FEMA has two programs. The EFSP, or the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, which was created in 1983 to help Americans, and the SSP, or the Shelter and Services Program, which was created 4 years ago to help only migrants. This bill doesn't fund the portion of FEMA that is supposed to help Americans. The money is specifically allocated to go to the SSP to help migrants only. The bill basically tells FEMA, here's $1.4 billion, spend it any way you want, but don't you dare give the money to Americans. Are you pissed yet? I know you're going to be pissed after you watch that video, especially when it gets to the enforcement section. But when you see what the Democrats tried to sneak in on page 218, you're going to lose your mind. If you have time, please watch that video. It will really open your eyes. There's just way too much to cover here. This video would be too long. Now let's go back to The View and listen to Joe lie about the deficit.
This is a guy who left with the largest deficit any president has added when he was last time president.
He said Trump left with a deficit larger than any other president did. Meanwhile, Joe added more to the deficit than Trump did. Again, let me prove it to you. Forget about this figure for now. We're going to get back to that. Let's scroll down to where it lists the deficits by year. Trump was elected in 2016. His first year in office was 2017. We could see that he added $0.67 trillion to the national debt. The following year, he added another $0.78. In 2019, he added $0.98. And in 2020, the year of COVID, he added $3.13. That gives us a total of $5.56 trillion added to the national debt under the Trump administration. Now let's compare this to what Joe and Kamala did. Their first year in office was 2021. They added $2.77 trillion. The following year, they added $1.38 trillion. And in 2023, they added another 1.7 to give us $5.85 trillion, which is $290 billion more than the Trump administration. But we're not done yet. We have to go back to the top of the page and add the deficit for 2024. So to this figure, we need to add another $1.9 trillion. And you can see Joe and Kamala gave us $7.75 trillion added to the national debt. Compare that to the $5.56 trillion that Trump gave, and we see that Joe and Kamala added an extra $2.2 trillion to the national debt compared to Trump. That's from the government website, USTreasury.gov. So when you hear Joe and the Democrats and the lying media saying that Trump added more to the deficit than Joe did, you know that they're lying. In fact, they're not just saying that Trump added more than Joe did. They're claiming that Trump added more to the deficit than any other president. Joe does not have the ability to tell the truth. He is a Democrat, so he lies constantly. Here he is again lying about the tax rate for billionaires.
I admire people who can make a hell of a lot of money. Just pay your taxes.
That's right. That's right.
No, I'm not joking. Average billionaire in America pays 8.2%.
That's it?
Must be nice.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
No, I'm not joking.
It's outrageous. That's why
8.2% federal
nice
tax.
Things.
Do you hear the idiot Joy again saying that's why we can't have nice things? Because according to Joe, billionaires are paying a tax rate of just 8.2%. He said the same thing during the debate.
What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes.
Okay, let's talk about this slide because Joe likes to use it a lot. Billionaires are not paying a tax rate of 8.2%. According to the IRS, they're paying a tax rate of 23%. That made-up figure of 8.2% is based on an analysis by Joe Biden's White House, assuming we tax unrealized gains, meaning they're taxing stock that hasn't even been sold. Even the IRS doesn't do that. So this is just wishful thinking by socialists and a hypothetical scenario that would never occur in the real world. But Joe and the corrupt media use this figure to manipulate the public and push a false narrative. Now let's go back to The View for more lies.
Mr. President, since you left office, there have been a number of books that have come out, deeply sourced from Democratic sources, that claim in your final year there was a dramatic decline in your cognitive abilities. In the final year of your presidency, what is your response to these allegations, or are these sources wrong?
They are wrong. There's nothing to sustain that, number one. Number two, think of what we're left with. We're left with a circumstance where we had an insurrection when I started, not since the Civil War.
Couple of things, Joe. You'd like to compare this to the Civil War. Number one, an insurrection is a revolution to overthrow an existing government. But how can a president be charged with that when he's already in office? Number two, if Trump really did incite an insurrection, why wasn't he impeached for it? You had corrupt politicians on the Republican side, like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, try to impeach him, but you failed twice. Number three, if those investigations, as conducted by the J6 committee, were fair and honest, why would you need to pardon everyone who was involved with that investigation? Number four, if this was an insurrection, why didn't your corrupt DOJ go after and prosecute and charge anyone with insurrection? You charged hundreds of Americans with trespass and assault, but not a single one was charged with an insurrection. The last point, if Trump caused an insurrection, why was the case thrown out? The reason the insurrection case was dismissed was because there was none. Now let's go back to The View and listen to Joe lie about COVID.
We had a circumstance where we were in a position that the pandemic, because of the incompetence of the last outfit, end up over 1 million people dying. 1 million people dying.
Because of the incompetence of Trump, over 1 million people died from COVID. But what you're not telling the American people, Joe, is that 94% of those deaths occurred during your administration. And I'm going to prove it to you. But first, let's go back to the 2020 debate between Kamala and Mike Pence. The very first question was about COVID.
Senator Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease.
Kamala claimed that 7 million Americans got COVID, and because of that, Trump should not be reelected. But under Joe and Kamala, the number of Americans infected went from 7 million to 103 million. And the number of people who died from COVID jumped from 210,000 to 1,123,000. And these numbers are low because, as you can see from the graph, they stopped counting in March of 2023. But according to Kamala, Trump's handling of COVID was the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. Meanwhile, Trump was responsible for just 6% of the cases, and you and Joe were responsible for the other 94%. And here's another thing to consider. Trump had to bear the brunt of COVID when it first came here in 2020. Trump didn't have the vaccine. You know the vaccine that Joe and all the Democrats fell in love with and forced every American to take? Trump didn't have that. And despite not having that vaccine, when Trump left office, infections were down to just below 5%. After Joe took over, infections soared to over 30%. And this is despite Joe's mask mandate. Do you remember that?
This is not about Democrat, Republican, or Independent. It's about saving Americans' lives. So let's institute a mask mandate nationwide, starting immediately, and we will save lives.
That's what real leadership looks like. We just witnessed real leadership, which is Joe Biden said that as a nation, we should all be wearing a mask.
Do you remember Democrat Congressman Jerry Nadler telling us it would be child abuse not to put your 2-year-old in a mask?
The gentleman asked, why should a 2-year-old? Well, and the fact of the matter is that people should require to be either vaccinated, especially a nurse who is dealing with patients, who is breathing on those patients. She can transmit the disease. So certainly she should be required to be vaccinated, because the vaccination not only protects her, it protects against transmission of the disease to the next person. Because the vaccination not only protects her, it protects against transmission of the disease to the next person. And the healthcare worker certainly ought to be required to be vaccinated. And when we have a pandemic like COVID-19 pandemic that we had, 2-year-olds should have been required to wear masks. It would be child abuse for parents not to do that.
Toddlers as young as 2 years old were forced to wear a mask.
Put your mask on. There you go. Keep it right there. Yay, Mason! Yay! Keep it on, Mason. Look, we're gonna keep it right here. Nope. Oh. Peekaboo, I see you. Keep your mask on. Put your mask back on. What are you looking at? Come on, keep it on your face. You gotta keep it on your face so we go outside. There you go. Mason. No, keep it on.
Now let's listen to Joe lie about his debate performance.
I'm going to say something outrageous. I've not lost many debates in my life. I've been pretty good at doing that. I was sick. I was no excuse, but
well,
I was not.
It's an explanation.
I had a bad night.
Yeah.
And I had anyway. I'm not going.
Did you immediately know you had had a bad night?
Yeah, I did. But even after that, the polls just showed me down by 2 points.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody believes he had a cold, but let's address his other statement. Joe says that even after the debate, he was down by just 2 points. Are you surprised to learn that that's another lie? Even the ultra-liberal New York Times poll had him down 6 points among likely voters and 8 points among registered voters. Even Trump-hating liberal CBS had to acknowledge that nearly 3/4 of registered voters didn't believe you had the mental acuity to run.
A new CBS News poll finds a growing number of American voters don't think President Biden should be running after that debate in Atlanta with former President Trump. 72% of registered voters in our CBS News poll say the president does not have, in their view, the mental and cognitive health to serve. That's up by 7 points compared to the time before the debate.
72% of voters thought that you couldn't hack it, Joe. But you and your wife were so power hungry, you just couldn't let it go. And speaking of Jill, let's listen to some of her lies.
I went onto the stage after the debate. I mean, we all saw it. It was terrible. So Joe looked at me and he said, I'll use screwed up. He said, he didn't say that. And I said, yeah.
We all know Joe Biden. We know what he said.
And I said, yeah, you did, Joe.
Really? You thought it was terrible? I remember you saying he did such a great job. Here it is right after it ended.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Lie!
I made a video exposing all of Joe's lies right after that debate. If you have a chance, please click on it and watch that video with Jill's comments in mind. How she can stand there and say that Trump lied is beyond me. Democrats do not have the ability to tell the truth. Remember, whatever they're accusing you of doing, they are doing. Now let's go back to The View and listen to Jill lie about how much Joe worked.
The people who wrote those books were not in the White House with us, and they didn't see how hard Joe worked every single day. I mean, he'd get up, he'd put in a full day, and then at night I'd be in bed, reading my book, and he was still on the phone, reading his briefings, working with staff. I mean, it was nonstop. It's the White House, being president is not like a job. It's a lifestyle. It's a life that you live. You live it 24 hours a day.
24 hours a day? Joe spent half his time at the beach.
Biden is again on vacation. Biden has spent a significant amount of time on vacation during his presidential term in office. And according to the data, the 81-year-old has taken 574 vacation days in less than 4 years. Isn't that amazing? Which accounts for approximately 40% of his time in office. At one point, Biden was on a vacation for 16 days straight. Have you ever taken 16 days straight? The latest news coming out is that when the Afghanistan withdrawal was going south, we all know how bad that was, no one could get a hold of Biden. Maybe he was on vacation. Well, this means that Biden accumulated more vacation days in a shorter period of time than the average American worker in nearly 5 decades. So you could have your whole career working for almost 50 years and not have the same amount of vacation days that Biden took when he was president.
That is absolutely true. And we can do the math. If you're like most Americans, you take 2 weeks vacation per year. 2 weeks, but 10 vacation days. After 50 years, you've taken off 500 days. Joe's got you beat by 74 days. And while you did this over a period of 50 years, Joe did it over a period of just 4. And yet Jill tells us that he never stopped working. Just more lies pushed by the Democrats. Now, you might be asking, why on earth would Joe subject himself to this? Even though it's a friendly interview with the idiots on The View, why isn't he enjoying his retirement? He's 82 years old. We know now that he has cancer. He should be sitting on a porch in his rocking chair, enjoying life. Why would he do this? Listen to Mark Halperin explain why Joe needs to do this.
You could say, as we've discussed, Biden's doing this to fight back, or Biden's doing this for his reputation. I talked to someone very familiar with the Bidens, and I think they've pointed out something that I'm going to say now that to me is the explanation, or at least part of the explanation, which is Biden Inc. has collapsed. All those Biden grandkids had a lavish lifestyle, which they very much liked. Hunter made hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. Joe, as a former president, is not in a position to get the same kind of paid speeches, corporate boards, book deal. Biden Inc. needs a source of revenue. And Hunter does, even though he was pardoned and he's not going to prison, Hunter does not have great earning capacity. And you look at the rest of the family.
Wait. The paintings aren't worth a lot?
No, the paintings are not worth a lot. So what I'm positing for you guys to weigh in on, Dan first, is my source right? Is what at least part of this is about, is the reality that Biden Inc., the trough is empty. The spigot has shut down. They need a way to get back in the game to make big money, to have the grandchildren fed and clothed and flown first class, etc.
That makes the most sense to me. Unlike Clinton and Obama, who bring in millions of dollars in speaking fees, Joe can't get through a sentence. So he knows he's not going to command that type of revenue. So he goes on friendly shows like The View, where he knows he won't be challenged, to stay relevant. That's all I got for you on this video. Thank you for staying to the end. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video.